What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball because it is yet another edition of Mock Draft Monday, and here joining us, you know him, you love him, from The Ringer, from freaking Netflix, it's Danny Kelly. Danny, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. Thank you very much for having me on. And yeah, I'm famously from Netflix. That's what everyone knows me from.
Listen, I'll tell you what. Down on the big TV downstairs, my wife and I are, tuning in to watch Love is Blind or whatever. And, you scroll a little bit down and I'm like, hey, I know those guys. You know those guys because actually my wife met you guys at a random hotel in Los Angeles one time. You and Danny, at least. So you know what? In this household, you are famous from Netflix, and that extends to this household, the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. But that's enough of streaming breakdowns here because we have serious business to discuss here, Danny. Here on Mock Draft Monday, the people know how it goes. We bring in some of the best mock drafters, some of the best draft analysts in the business, and they give us 5 player-to-team fits that they absolutely love from their most recent mock draft, plus 1 player that they're willing to stand on the table for this draft season. Danny, thanks to you, you dabble both as a draft analyst and a fantasy analyst, so you really played the hits on this one, man. And I say you dabble, you specialize in both, so you gave us good skill position players to talk about today, so we have a ton to get into, so let's waste no more time. With that, welcome to another edition of Mock Draft Monday. All right, Danny, let's get into it. Who is your first player to team fit that you absolutely love?
So this is probably not new to anyone, but I mocked Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon, to the Chiefs. And this was basically a post-combine reaction based on what he did at the combine. It doesn't really feel like he's going to drop all that far based on the fact he's one of the most athletic, if not the most athletic tight end that we've ever seen tested the combine. Basically Vernon Davis style numbers athletically. And so, obviously there's questions about his production in college, but I think it was validating to see kind of him put those numbers up athletically, his speed, explosion, change of direction. You kind of see that stuff on tape. And so he feels like a player that is not going to drop very far in this draft, especially in a draft where there aren't a ton of blue chip players. Yeah.
Before we get to Kenyon Sadiq specifically, I do kind of want to have you hit that last point there about blue chip players and the lack of them in this class, because that's something that I think anytime I've talked with anyone about, we'll say pass catchers here to group Sadiq in with the wide receivers, but, some of the guys at the receiver position, I think that have been getting pushed up. It's like, well, are they really all that great of players, or is it just like this is the deepest position in the draft and there's just not that many guys to rank in your top 30 or top 25 or whatever. So kind of before we talk about Sadiq specifically and the Chiefs specifically, zoom out here a little bit and tell the people who maybe are just coming into the draft phase, coming out of free agency, like what they can kind of expect from this class as a whole.
I think there's a handful of, I don't even know if blue chip is the right term, but very exciting prospects, especially edge players. I guess edge and linebacker, Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles. This class, I think, is defined by the fact that it's got a bunch of really exciting players at lower, quote unquote, lower value positions, whether that's linebacker, off-ball linebacker, running back. Obviously, Jeremiah Love is going to go pretty highly in this class. I think he could even go top 10. There's a lot of talk about him top 5 at this point. Safety is another position that I think there's really interesting, really, really exciting players. So I think it's going into this draft. The question in my mind is going to be how willing are teams going to be to take these quote unquote less premium positions early on in the draft, because outside of that, there are just not a lot of quote unquote blue chip players. There's a couple of very good tackles. I wouldn't call them elite prospects. There's a couple of edge players. All the edge players have some big question mark attached to them pretty much. And so, then there's a couple of guards, a couple of defensive tackles. It really does come down to how willing teams are going to be to take non-premium positions in the top 10.
So give me a number. When you're ranking the class, what's the first guy that you're like, this doesn't feel like a top 8, top 10, top 12 type play. What's the first guy? You don't have to give me a name, but just around the number where you're like, this is where it falls off.
Honestly, 6 or 7. I think it's, you can even, You could even like look at the guy who's going to be the number 1 pick in Fernando Mendoza. I think in most drafts, he's probably not the top pick. In most drafts, a guy like Arvell Reese and or Sonny Styles are probably not going to be the number 2 overall pick. I could even go as far as saying like there might be no guys in this class that I'm like, oh yeah, that's a top 5 guy. You know what I mean? Because there are those questions on position group, and every one of these guys, Ruben Bain is a perfect example. I mean, Ruben Bain, when you watch him play, he's the top 5 pick all day, but then he's a massive outlier because of his lack of arm length, and whether teams, are going to be okay with that, because, betting on outliers, generally speaking, is a losing proposition. Sometimes it works, but most of the time that's why they're called outliers, and I think, there's going to be a lot of surprises in this draft. I know people say that every year, but there's going to be more than ever players that you don't really expect to go in the top 10 or 15 probably go in this class because of everything I just kind of broke down. Even some of the top corners, lack of speed, lack of explosiveness. Jermod McCoy coming off of an injury and didn't practice or didn't participate in the combine. It feels like with every single one of these players in this class, there is a big question mark. So I'm not trying to like poo-poo the whole class, but that is kind of how it feels to me, that there's just question marks with pretty much everybody in this class.
Well, I think that dovetails us perfectly right back to the Kenyon Sadiq thing, where you're talking about like a guy who probably is not a top 10 prospect, maybe not in this draft, maybe not in any draft. And yet, could we get that surprising type of player? I will say this. We've done 2 Mock Draft Monday episodes before this one. We did a joint one with Nate Tice in the Football 301 crossover. Then we did one with EJ Snyder from the Combine as well. Kenyon Sadiq has now come up in all 3 of them. So I think he is a fascinating player to continue to get people's thoughts on. But kind of before we talk about his fit with the Chiefs and why you like this one, again, you mentioned the lack of production. Like, what are the pros and cons of him as a prospect?
So the pros are obviously, like I mentioned, athleticism. I do think in terms of his archetype as a player, he is more of a dual threat guy who can be out there in rundowns and blocking. And he's pretty good at, getting out in space, sealing off guys on screenplays. He's not a 0 as a blocker. In fact, I think he's a pretty good blocker. He has some potential to be a very good blocker. And so he's not a typical move tight end that you'd kind of expect with a player where, I think Dalton Kincaid kind of comes to mind, where it's like you just don't really know what to do with him. He's a really good receiver, or theoretically he's a really good receiver, but you just don't really know how to utilize him, because when he's on the field, it's very much a tell for what your offense is going to do. I don't think Sadiq is that player at all. He's the type of guy who he likes to, get in there and block. He's gritty. He sustains. He's really strong. I mean, if you look at his upper body, I mean, his biceps are absolutely freakish. Like, he has biceps on
shredded,
his biceps. And so, he's gonna be undersized. That's one of the cons. 6'3", 241, I think he measured in at. But he can get in there and block. He reminds me of like a Laporta type, where maybe not like a elite blocker, but good enough to be on the field all 3 downs and not going to totally give away what you're doing. So that would be a plus. And then obviously the speed, his ability to get up the seam. He does have some drops that would probably be in the negative category, but he also is the type of player, and you probably run into these types of guys all the time charting receivers. He makes some incredible catches also. He's like capable of making the tough catches, but then sometimes drops the easy ones. So I really do like him. It does worry me in the back of my mind that his production relative to some of these other elite tight ends that we've seen come into the league is not good in terms of just yards per route run and overall production. But the tools are there, and I think the effort and grit as a blocker is there to make him an every down guy. So overall, I really do like him. I think he has, especially in this class, a top 10 potential.
Yeah, I don't want to totally wave away the production concerns, but I do think and I'm sure people have done way better like data-based modeling on everything that I'm about to say, when I'm just going to throw like anecdotal evidence out here. But to me, like watching college offenses, I don't know that they necessarily have what it takes to from a conceptual standpoint, like integrate a tight end. I mean, some NFL offenses really struggle to integrate like a tight end into their base passing concepts, like as the first or second read. So college offenses certainly, I think, are a step behind that. So I don't know if that's like totally a huge concern, but I love your point about his ability as a blocker. Again, I don't chart tight ends, I just chart the receivers. So this is, again, just more of me like watching cut ups on the guy. I do think he is willing and able. And willing is the biggest thing. Like if you can't just completely shy away from it, you've got to want to have it. You got to have a little want to there. I think he certainly brings that to the table. I don't think he's quite in the danger zone of like a Dalton Kincaid where it's like, this guy's a glorified slot receiver. And that essentially just means he's like the slowest slot receiver in the league. So that's where he's gotten kind of stuck there. I actually really like your Laporta comparison in a way that like Laporta is not a great blocker or anything, but he's not an outright negative there as well. So kind of talk to me about your fit with him here in Kansas City and sort of what you're imagining there if he ends up being the 9th overall pick.
So, look, the receiver core in Kansas City is in flux. I don't know what's going to happen with Rashee Rice going forward. Stinks is probably a better and more succinct way of putting it. Xavier Worthy, even though he is literally fast, I don't know what speed element he truly brings to the offense. I think Tyquan Thornton was much more of that kind of guy for the Chiefs last year. I think basically the reason I paired Sadiq with the Chiefs in this draft is because I do think they need more speed. This was before they signed Kenneth Walker, but that doesn't really change anything for me because I think on paper or in practice felt like one of the slowest offenses last year. And so getting a guy with the speed to run after the catch, get up the seam, create some explosive plays from that position. Travis Kelce's still a very serviceable and useful player, obviously, and he's still puts up production, but he's not going to be the type of guy that's running away from linebackers, safeties over the middle of the field. Theoretically, I could see Sadiq doing some of the things over the middle of the field that Rashee Rice is so good at in terms of run after the catch, these mesh routes, things like that. They could get him involved in that. And he has the athleticism and speed and explosiveness and tackle breaking ability to be productive in those types of plays as well. So I just think he fits the offense, what they want to do. And again, he's not a zero when it comes to blocking. He can be out there, run blocking. He tries. I think that's what you said. He actually has the baseline effort, which not all tight ends coming out of college do. I think at least he gives the effort, and he's, in my opinion, better than most tight ends coming out of college at blocking. So I don't really know if this is realistic. It was a little bit fantasy brained, to be honest, to make this pairing, but I would love to see it happen.
Well, I think it accomplishes a lot. Like to be honest, you've kind of sold me on this one. This hasn't been a match I've seen yet, Kenyon Sadiq in Kansas City. Because one, if he does bring a little bit as a blocker, Kelsey's not doing that at this point. He's gotten better throughout his career, like at the last few years of his career, but still, that's not a big deal. They want to get better as a rushing team. Signing Kenneth Walker sort of proves that. I think it accomplishes that. They have done some fun stuff with tight ends in the past. It's just like Kelsey is so limited at this point, and like Noah Gray is what he is. Like, I think that he does give them some potential there, but really I think what you sold it in the two ways, like one, him potentially being sort of a Rashee Rice replacement as kind of a hefty slot player. And if we can flash that, the Deshaun Jackson, Odell Beckham kind of tweet here that we were showing a little bit ago, I think this one really sold me when it comes to Kenyon Sadiq, because the Chiefs are just obsessed with these like small, fast receivers. So if you're telling me like I think Andy Reid keeps trying to find Deshaun Jackson. And if you're watching along with us on YouTube right now, 10-yard split, Kenyon Sadiq 1.54, Deshaun Jackson 1.55. So in a roundabout way, I know it's insane because like Deshaun Jackson, is 170 pounds or whatever he was in his prime, and Kenyon Sadiq is 240. It's pretty insane. So there you go. In a roundabout way, Andy Reid gets himself another small, fast receiver. There we go. But in a real big boy package. So you sold me on this one, Danny. I like this one. Give me your second player to team fit that you absolutely love.
Okay, so this next one, I got Carnell Tate going to the Dolphins, I believe, at 11. Yeah, Carnell Tate to the Dolphins. I just think the Dolphins, whatever they're doing on offense, they need more weapons on offense. Obviously, they went out and signed Malik Willis. I'm cautiously optimistic about this Malik Willis sign. I don't know where you land on it. I know that the sample size is minuscule and everything, and there's reason to be worried, but I think it's a worthwhile risk for them to do. I think Carnell Tate fits the type of offense that, or at least the type of passing game that I think Malik Willis is going to be running, where he's pushing the ball down the field. Some of the numbers he had last year on deep shots was really encouraging. Carnell Tate's an awesome downfield receiver, wins at the catch point. You know, he for how skinny he is, I think he's really strong at the catch point and dominates those 50-50 type passes. Really smooth, really explosive down the field. I know that maybe on paper he's not the fastest guy, but I think he has that build-up speed to really separate down the field, create explosive plays. I think he's a good complement to what you get from Jalen Waddle, who to me is not a number one receiver. He's more of a complementary number two. I don't, obviously, again, going back to this class, I don't know if Carnell Tate is a prototypical number one, but he's more of a number one, I think, than Jalen Waddle is. So I'm just getting more weapons in this Miami Dolphins offense. I full disclosure, made this pick before they signed Malik Willis, but I do think it makes a lot of sense for that type of offense that they're going to want to run, where it's predicated on running the football, Devon Achane, you know, mixing with what Willis can do on the ground, and then deep shots off play action and deep shots, you know, where they're getting the right types of personnel groups to go deep against. And so I do think this makes a lot of sense. You know, the Dolphins have a lot of holes, so maybe they'll go for the trenches or something. But I do think they just need more weapons. I mean, look at their receiver core is all guys who are 5'10" and below, basically. So
they literally just signed Tutu Atwell. Like right as we're recording this right now. Yeah, they literally.
Oh my Lord!
So, whatever you thought about the average size of the Dolphins wide receiver room, you can go ahead and knock it down a little bit because they just signed Tutu Atwell to a 1-year deal.
Unbelievable. I've been railing on the Dolphins all season, or all last season, because they're like the smallest team. This is a big man sport, and they're just tiny. And then they go and sign Tutu Atwell. Classic.
They're like, we got to get tinier. How can we get smaller?
Hear me out. Even smaller. I don't know. There might be something there. But yeah, let me know what you think of this matchup, because I you know, especially with the Willis thing, it actually does kind of make some sense to me.
Well, it's funny as you were talking about the Malik Willis thing, because at first when you sent the names over, I was like, yeah, it's going to be tough. Like they want to take a wide receiver when they're probably going to be a pretty run heavy offense with Malik, but I'm thinking about Carnell Tate and just his route tree. What I've charted so far, like, he's so good in that vertical game, specifically like stacking stacking corners on the boundary and getting separation down the field, despite that 4-5-3 that we don't care about. And I just think about like Malik Willis dropping go routes in the bucket to Romeo Doubs against the Bears last year.
Exactly.
Like I can see Carnell Tate on the other end of those passes. So that makes a lot of sense to me in that regard. And something, Danny, that has kind of just irritated me about this Dolphins team, among many things, the last couple of years, is that because they did, and understandably so, they did so much role catering for Tyreek Hill, because it's like, how can we get the most explosive player in the NFL, the ball in his hands quickly, all of that type of stuff. You realize like that means that they're just kind of leaving Jalen Waddle outside on the ball all the time. And I don't really think that's the best use for him. I do kind of think that's the best use for Carnell Tate. So it kind of allows you to get the best of Tate and get the best of Waddle, which I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
I kind of see Waddle. Obviously, the speed element, he can get deep, but he's much more comfortable on, you know, quick in breakers, run after the catch, get the ball in his hands quickly, and he can make things happen. I see him as kind of that short and intermediate threat, and then Tate will be take the top off the defense, open things up for the run game. They're going to want to run the heck out of the ball, and it would help to have someone who can kind of stretch the defense and at least threaten deep. Tutu Atwell is the just poor man version of that, I suppose. Maybe they're just, you know, that's like a hedge type of move, but yeah, I think
he's there to run the full speed motion, for the love of the game routes. Like that's what he's there to do. Like just create leverage for Carnell Tate. Like we run Tutu Atwell from the left side of the field all the way to the right, and just like create a little leverage for Tate. That's all he's there to do.
Exactly. So anyways,
all right.
Dolphins.
Yeah, I like this one. All
right. Sweet. And then the third one is Denzel Boston to the Eagles. And again, this was coming out of the combine. There was some uncertainty, and I think there still is some uncertainty with AJ Brown's future in Philadelphia. They didn't end up trading him during the first wave of free agency. It could still happen, but I think Eagles, generally speaking, have done a pretty good job of taking the quote premium positions in the draft. That's trenches, offensive linemen, defensive linemen. They've invested in the cornerbacks group lately, which has been a huge payoff for them. And receiver has been a big thing for them. So Boston, again, is in that vein where big-bodied, go up and get the ball, win at the catch point. I think he fits exactly what Jalen Hurts brings to the offense in terms of Hurts is willing to throw the ball up, down the field, down the sideline, and let the receiver do his job. And so I think Boston fits that kind of archetype. He's not the most explosive, not the twitchiest guy, but he's really good at the catch point, really good at separating late, and has great body control and hands at the catch point.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Boston, and I think this actually makes a ton of sense if we're considering. Yeah, my comparison for him was Diet Coke, Mike Evans, Bud Light, Mike Evans, whatever you want to. Yeah. Well, the graphic is just great. Shout out to Jason Jung on that one. But that was my comparison for him, which was funny because in the first mock draft Monday, I sent him to San Francisco, and then they were like, "Oh, there you go. Screw that. Let's sign full ABV Mike Evans at 33 years old. Let's just go ahead and go for that. Let's get the full, the Four Loco version of Mike Evans. So that's fine. But I think though, if we're thinking about Boston in this Eagles offense, which what do you think the Eagles offense is going to look like this year? Because Sean Mannion coming in here, everything they're saying and signaling by signing, a blocking tight. I don't want to make too much of this, but signing a blocking tight end like Johnny Munt, and reworking Goddard's contract. I think. Yeah. They still brought back Grant Calcaterra, who can't block a soul, but it does seem as if they want to transition to more of a, whatever you want to call it, Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur type offense. Do you think I'm reading that right? Do you think that's what this offense is going to look like this year? Or what's your kind of sense of the situation?
My sense of the situation has kind of been, and look, I lived through the Russell Wilson era in Seattle. I'm a Seahawks fan. So every offseason they talk about this, that, or the other thing that they're going to make the offense into, implement the offense. What offensive coordinator are we bringing in here? What's it going to be? At the end of the day, it was the Russell Wilson offense every year. And I think that's kind of what the Eagles are. It's going to be the Jalen Hurts offense. Basically how your offense works around what he's willing to do. You could say his limitations are just what he's willing to do, because he just generally doesn't want to turn the ball over. That's usually a very good thing, that you don't turn the ball over. But he's not, if you look at the numbers, he's not passing over the middle field, not nearly as often as most quarterbacks do. That kind of shrinks what the defense has to really respect and makes it harder for everything else. That's exactly kind of what happened with Russell Wilson throughout his career. And I think we're seeing the same thing happen with Jalen Hurts. And so, the offense will be different. It's a little bit different every year, and I'm sure the focuses will be slightly different. I'm sure they want to get Saquon going a little bit more this year, have him be the foundation of the offense. But the passing game is probably just going to be dictated by what Jalen Hurts is comfortable doing, and I don't think he's usually all that comfortable putting it over the middle of the field and putting it at risk, so to speak. And so that was, again, kind of why I saw Boston as a big fit for him. Is he can win those outside routes. He can win down the sideline. He does. I thought he's pretty interesting in running out of the slot as well, what he can do over the middle of the field, a little bit of run after the catch. But big bodied, win at the catch point, Moss cornerbacks at the, on these 50-50 balls, and try to create explosive plays in the passing game.
This is why I ended up with the kind of Bud Light Mike Evans comparison for him, because number one, you just can't. I'm never going to say you're Mike Evans, because Mike Evans is a one of one freak, longest arms we've ever seen at the wide receiver position ever. But I do think the way that Mike Evans has become this guy that, if you want him to go run on the perimeter and dunk on opposing defenses on go routes and some of those outside perimeter routes like you're talking about here, which are very much the Jalen Hurts routes, he can absolutely do that. But Mike has developed so much as a guy that can run out of the slot and run some of those in breakers. Like that's the best stuff he does right now is run like slants and digs from the X receiver spot or from the slot or whatever. That's some of his best work right now. And I think Boston could be one of he shows flashes of doing that too, especially against zone coverage, maybe more than man coverage, just because he's got that big body and he knows how to use it, like shield defenders, like create those windows there, breaking over the middle of the field. And I think that's the fun part about this is that you're totally right to compare Jalen Hurts to Russell Wilson. Like Nate and I have done that at times too, that it kind of feels like a similar arc there, that every offense just becomes the Jalen Hurts offense, just like every offense became the Russell Wilson offense. But I do think they want to be different. The reality is like Hurts just has to make it work. But Boston, I think, is a fun pairing here because he could live in the old world or if Hurts pulls off the evolution, I think he makes a ton of sense in an offense that's trying to work over the middle of the field like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And obviously, you know, on paper, this looks like a little redundant if AJ Brown is still in Philly, but you know, Howie Roseman's always the type of guy who plans a year in advance on a lot of these positions. You know, he's not sort of trying to patch holes as they go. He wants to have a deep roster at every position. So yeah, that was kind of my thinking on this. And they generally, like I said, they usually spend their first rounders on the premium position. I think wide receiver is that for them.
100%. And they've tried to get like a third receiver in. There's not a point because they're never going to get the targets when you have Brown and Smith, like especially, and you have Goddard, like they're never going to get targets. But you know, they traded for Jahan Dotson. They drafted guys like Arian Smith and Johnny Wilson. Like they've tried to find that third Johnny receiver Wilson. At times here.
Yeah,
another big boy. You know, they've tried. I'll never forget. They've tried to find that guy. Just hasn't really happened yet. So that's one thing to get. But before we toss to break here, before we get off this one, like, do you think AJ Brown is on this Eagles team? Like, do you think he's on this team at this point?
I think he's on the. I think he will be on the team at least this year. And then I don't know. I forget what his contract implications are, but I think he's like more valuable to them this season, where they kind of can go for it, you know. Both conferences are kind of wide open. This, you know, that was like why the Seahawks were such a surprising Super Bowl winner this last year, I think, is because there's just a lot of teams that are sort of in flux or whatever, and especially with the AFC in flux with, you know, Burrow, his supporting cast is kind of all over the place, especially on defense. Mahomes coming off the ACL. The Chiefs are kind of in the down year. A lot of teams are loading up and trying to go for it this year. And I think the Eagles certainly see themselves as a team that could win the Super Bowl this year. So they're better with him than without him. And, you know, especially having the DJ Moore trade, I thought there was like a small chance that maybe a team could just give like 2 seconds and a player or something like that and go get AJ Brown. He's getting a little up there in age. He's, you know, kind of a malcontent, or at least that's what it seems like on the outside. And I thought maybe they could do that. But now when DJ Moore is going for a second, I'm like, you got to give at least a first to go get a guy like AJ Brown. And so I think that's kind of narrowed the potential trade options for, you know, teams wanting to trade with the Eagles. So that kind of changed my opinion a little bit on this whole thing.
Yeah, it's like when the Christian Kirk contract launched the wide receiver market into the stratosphere. Yeah. It changed everything, and it's like, oh, wow, we got to trade this guy because like Christian Kirk is making this. Like it was a big domino effect there. Because I'm with you. If you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, especially when the Eagles people with the team are starting to come out and be like, you know, we think Devontae Smith could be an alpha, like in the right situation. Totally. I'm like, by the way, I also think that, and that tells me that you're trying to sell. I would love to see it too, and I think we will at some point. I would have thought, okay, AJ's gone, but that DJ Moore trade, I'm with you because I think AJ Brown is not worth a first round pick at this point. Like I would not trade a first round pick based on the film that AJ put out last year. I just don't think you can do it. I know what the reputation is. I know that's what the Eagles want, but still. And the fact that the DJ Moore trade, like Brandon Beane threw that second rounder in there. If I'm Howie Roseman, I'm like, I don't care if AJ took a step back on film last year. We're still needing a first if he's getting a second. So I think he at least is on the team through the trade deadline now is kind of my thought. But I'm also willing to totally be wrong about that. But either way, I think Denzel Boston is a fun fit, Danny, because he kind of allows the Eagles to live in one of those two worlds as we've outlined here. We are going to take our first quick break. When we come back, Danny Kelly gives us two more player to team fits that he absolutely loves. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. We're continuing Mock Draft Monday here with Danny Kelly from The Ringer. He's got two more player to team fits that he absolutely loves. Danny, give us your next one here.
So the other one that I have here is Jordyn Tyson going to the Steelers. I think this is an interesting one simply because the Steelers have almost no one else on their roster outside DK Metcalf. So I kind of wanted to just make sure I circled that. Last year with the Steelers late in the season, we're running out some like just crazy receiver group late in the season. If you look at their depth chart, you can't like name. There's like two guys you can name on their roster: Roman Wilson and DK Metcalf, and then there's a handful of guys on the practice squad. I know that in free agency, they could potentially still add some guys and fix that group a little bit, but they need more talent at receiver. Who did they sign? Mm-hmm. They signed. They traded for Michael Pittman. So that definitely, Michael Pittman, yeah. I thought that was a smart move, and that was basically in line with why I was giving them Jordyn Tyson in this post-combine mock. But I do think they still need depth. I mean, basically, it's DK Metcalf, Ben Skoranek, and Roman Wilson outside of Michael Pittman ad. Right. So, depth. It's just ironic from a team that for years was known as the receiver factory, the team that couldn't miss on receiver. Although they missed a few guys, but like just superstar after superstar receiver. And you look at their depth chart and it's really just bare at this point. They could still, even with Michael Pittman, they need another guy. So Jordyn Tyson, he's a twitchy receiver, moves really smoothly, big catch radius, big guy. I think he could add a little bit as a run after the catch type of threat. 3-level guy. He can attack all three levels. I just think he makes a lot of sense, and he would be a good complement to DK Metcalf. I think he's kind of he's in a similar vein, I guess, to Michael Pittman in some ways. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the Steelers just need weapons at this point.
Right. And obviously if it's this year and it's Aaron Rodgers, and hopefully by the time this show goes out, we have an answer to that, but probably not. We probably will go like five more mock draft Mondays before we find out if Aaron Rodgers is starting for the Steelers or not. Although I'm hoping that this take ages super poorly, and we do have an answer by the time the show goes out. However, regardless, I'm with you that it might not be a year one thing for Jordyn Tyson if Aaron Rodgers is a quarterback and he's behind DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman. But nevertheless, like I actually think that could be good for Jordyn Tyson, because we'll come back to this. I kind of think he could use a year of seasoning and development. But I think when we look at this receiver room, you're so right. Like it's completely bare bones after those two guys. And I love the way that Metcalf and Pittman complement each other on paper. Yeah. But they're both guys on their third contracts in the NFL. Pittman will turn 29 this year. Metcalf's got to be close to like 29, I think, at this point, something like that. Although because he came into the league a little bit younger,
28.
But still, he might be like
he'll turn 29 in December.
Which I think Pittman is like October or November or something like that. I don't have his birthday off the top of my head. We're not on birthday. He's October familiarity. Yeah, well,
October 5th. So there you go. You're right.
Clearly, I've looked at this recently. Shout out to Michael Pittman, but so those guys will turn 29. It's not exactly like they're around forever. And yeah, I had somebody ask me yesterday, like, okay, well, so Metcalf's the X, Pittman's the Z. When we go to 11 personnel, like who's playing slot for this team? And I said a rookie that they draft. And even if it's not a first round pick, they're using a pick on a receiver at some point. And I do think Tyson, it's interesting, like you say about the Michael Pittman thing. I kind of think, and you tell me if you disagree with this, I think Tyson probably fits best as a flanker receiver, just based on like a Z guy that you move around a little bit. So I actually think those two guys could work in tandem a little.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he's got the size to be an X, but the physicality isn't quite where I would prefer. And look, he's like the number one receiver for some guys in this class. I kind of have a bunch of guys grouped together, and you know this, like some people just have biases when they're looking at receivers. Everyone has a little slightly different sort of opinion and flavor of what type of receiver they are drawn to. I thought Tyson showed, like I said, he's really twitchy mover, which I love. He can shake coverage. He can get open early on in his route. He has good body control. But I thought there was times where he was bullied off his route late in the route, like down the field. He didn't position himself very well for 50-50 balls or whatever. Like the ball is going up and he kind of just didn't end up being in position to even try and make a play on it. His catch rate on contested catches wasn't very good in college. I thought he was too often kind of muscled at the catch point. And then also, there's sort of the injury history, which isn't a huge red flag to me, but it is something that you kind of have to consider. He's basically been injured every year in his college career. So those kind of variables are why I have him slightly lower, I guess, than a lot of people do in this class. I do look at his production, and that's what kind of worries me, that I'm going to be dead wrong on that. And he should probably be like the number one receiver in this class because his production profile, I think, is pretty good. But those are some of the reasons I'd have him dropping just slightly compared to maybe a lot of people would.
I think that the production profile and kind of measuring a lot of what you said from a film standpoint and an injury standpoint, like we just don't know with the injuries, like what that looks like to every single team. By the way, like 30 NFL teams might say no thanks to Jordyn Tyson's injury history in the first round, especially as we kind of continue to go through the process. And like, what do we see from him through the process? Like, what does he do through the process? Is this going to be a situation where like Corey Davis, remember, he like didn't test, I don't think, at all throughout the entire NFL scouting process, like leading up to the draft. I'm pretty sure I remember this correctly, although I could totally be wrong, but this obviously has happened before.
Sounds
Marvin Harrison, right? Did nothing going through the process. And it's like, I kind of wish I knew what Marvin Harrison's, I don't really care about like a 40 time in isolation or like, but I care about like change of direction, 3-cone, like all that type of stuff. We just don't get that for a lot of these guys. If we get none of that from Tyson, same thing with like Corey Davis, where it's like, yeah, he looked awesome as an athlete at Western Michigan or whatever. And then his first year in the NFL, I'm like, he doesn't really match up athletically with these guys. So it's just one of those things that you want to see. We'll see if does Tyson do anything before the draft. We'll find out here over the next couple of months. But that's like one of those boxes, weighing the film, weighing the production profile. It's why I think you probably still come down with him as a late first round player, which here for Pittsburgh at, in the 20s, 21 overall, I think is probably a fair-ish spot for him to land.
Have you done much charting on him yet?
Yeah, I've got like 4 to 5 games on all the guys we're talking about at least here. I went and refreshed actually my opinion on. Go ahead.
I was going to say, are you at liberty to give us your take on him? Like, do you have him as like an elite type of prospect, or are you kind of more on the fence on it?
I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence. Yeah. If you can't tell, I'm on the fence about him. And frankly, I don't think like any of these guys. I don't think any of these guys are really like elite prospects, honestly. Like, I don't know that any of them, to me, even the couple of the other guys we'll talk about here, but like Tate, I think probably would be my one in the class right now, just because like I think he fits every single offense in the league, because every offense, whether you're going to use that guy to the highest capability or not, needs an on-ball vertical X receiver, and I think Tate can be that guy. But is that guy a number one? Like, I kind of compared him to Calvin Ridley, but better at the catch point. And like Calvin Ridley at times, like he's a passable number one, but probably more of a two. And like to me, like none of these guys are even as good as prospects as like, obviously forget the 24 class where we had 3 guys and go in the top 10. I don't even think any of them are as good as like Drake London, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. Like those guys to me are a tier better than everybody else in this class.
Same. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm pretty much on the same page. I think Tate is my clear-cut top tier of this class in terms of the receivers. I really like Makai Lemon, but I say that with sort of, the obvious is that he's more of like an inside guy. He lacks size. The size limitations could be an issue in the league, but it's goes back to everything I said kind of in the beginning of the show, which is, there's always a but with everybody in this class. I feel like even at the very top, there's a lot of things to really like about these guys, but there's issues that would kind of push them down a board in normal seasons, and so, or in normal draft years. And so, I'm with you. I think we've got a lot of number 2 receiver types and not a lot of 1 receiver types in this one.
And it's interesting when we think about Tyson, because my issues with him are like, he really fluid, moves well, And I think sometimes people see that and they're like, he's a great route runner. To me, he's not. He's very fluid, but I think the details for him, like he oversells stuff, and like that's just not going to fly against better corners, in addition to like the physicality concerns that I think he's a young player, like 2 to 3 years in the league. He might be really ready to rock if he irons out those details, but that's a complete unknown. I don't know if I'd love sending him to the Mike McCarthy factory of football if we're talking about about him going to kind of going along that
is he a Steeler case. Is he a Pittsburgh identity? Does he fit that? Maybe not. Yeah.
Well, he was coached by Hines Ward, and like that gets brought up in every single one of it. That gets brought up in every single scouting report I read from him, and I'm like, okay, but like he's again, everybody has questions about the physicality, and Hines Ward's like the most physical wide receiver maybe of our lifetime, Danny. So I actually kind of struggle to see how that matters, but it is a point that really gets brought up a lot. So maybe Hines, honestly, that type of stuff ends up mattering a lot. Clearly Pittsburgh loves Pittsburgh. That's why Mike McCarthy's the coach.
Totally.
So actually I kind of could see this happening simply because like Hines Ward is the receiver
Hines
coach.
Is like, yeah, that's my guy. And they're like, okay, we're doing it.
Sold. We hear it on mid-March. We just discovered like why Jordyn Tyson is definitely getting drafted by the Steelers there. So there we go. Okay, let's get to your fifth and final player to team fit that you love. And you mentioned biases at wide receiver, Danny. I will admit that this is the type of receiver that I am biased to that you're about to talk about here.
Oh, okay. Concepcion for the Patriots in this mock draft. And again, this was post combine, coming out of the combine, kind of wanted to make some connections here. And I know that they signed Romeo Doubs, but I don't think that necessarily changes anything. They still need guys in the receiver core. They're still kind of relying on Matt Collins and Demario Douglas and some of these other guys. Kyle Williams is still developing behind, and I don't know if he's going to end up turning into anything at this point. I think he's certainly shown some flashes, but doesn't know if I don't know if they really trust him at this point. So Concepcion, he is, again, I thought he was more twitchy and explosive than a guy like Tyson in terms of his movement ability, his run after the catch. I thought he had really good body control kind of at the catch point to go up and catch balls that were a little bit behind him or down low or things like that. He's played inside and outside. And I don't know. I just thought he was a really fun, explosive player. I think in most years he's probably a second rounder, but there's a chance he could be a first rounder in this class. And so, yeah, he's another guy that I am very intrigued with, but I think he's probably in that number 2 role in the NFL. And so, yeah, I think, giving him to the Patriots, they need some help, obviously, with Drake May. He could use all the receiver help that he can get. Stephon Diggs is gone. So yeah, Casey Concepcion, what did you think of him?
I'm a big fan. I know he has the drop problems. And sometimes he claps at the ball, but other times I think it's mostly a focus issue. At least on the film that I've watched from this past year, I think it's more of like a focus issue than an attack issue necessarily. I think he is just a guy that is going to help in offense, no question. And I actually compared him like he's somewhere between Jayden Reed and Stephon Diggs. So obviously him like being the replacement for Diggs, I think makes sense here. Because a guy like Jayden Reed is somebody that hasn't quite ironed out all those details from the technician standpoint, from a release, from a route standpoint, from a contested. He had a couple of seasons where he had or his second season, he had a huge drop problem, did Jayden Reed. And I thought that was like mostly a focus issue. So that's why I kind of think that's a good. And obviously, it could be way worse than that. But like if he works out, that's sort of the range for him. Is I think he's somewhere between Jayden Reed and Stephon Diggs. So him replacing Stephon Diggs makes a ton of sense here for New England. I'm a huge fan of his game. I might mess around and rank him as like receiver 2 or receiver 3, depending on kind of how I'm feeling towards the end of the process. I really like his game a lot.
Yeah, I'm a big. I don't know how to even, I guess, define it, but I'm just like a big movement skills person when I'm looking at receivers in terms of just their body control, their burst, their suddenness, their twitch. And he just seemed to me to be like a really good, like for lack of a better way, like a really good athlete. He's just a really easy mover, really sudden, great, footwork and marrying his like release with his hands and in terms of catching the football and running with it right away and not having to like hitch or gather. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of things to like here. And I like that he also was able to play outside a bunch in his final season with Texas A&M, whereas he was like kind of an inside guy early on in his career. He reminded me of, and this is more of just like the way he moves. He reminded me of Khalil Shakir. I think he could play outside a little bit more. Like Shakir has kind of been pigeonholed into the slot, which maybe is for the best, but just their body movement and ability to kind of change direction quickly without losing balance, without losing speed, that kind of reminded me of him. So I thought the Jayden Reed comp actually makes a lot of sense to me too.
Well, and yeah, if you think about it, his early career, Casey Concepcion, he handled like a ton of rushing work, a lot more of like kind of the designer stuff at NC State. So I think he's just shown that like progression away from that.
Yep.
Whereas Jayden Reed at this point, especially last year with injuries, has never really gotten the ability to kind of go farther than that. Shakir has been kind of stuck. So I think that's the archetype of player we're looking at. If he really, really hits big, he's Steph Diggs, or he's just one of these more like useful receivers. And for New England too, their fans were like kind of all up in arms about like, why didn't we get a number one receiver? Like we just got another kind of 2 or 3 in Romeo Doubs. Like, well, number one, that's what's available in free agency. They're looking, where are the number one receivers? They're not on the open market in free agency. If you want one, you got to trade for one, or you got to draft one. Yeah. I don't know if like for AJ sure Brown. Casey's right. You could trade for AJ Brown, or you could try to find the next one. And like, I don't know if Casey Concepcion is going to be a number one receiver, but I would like to take the shot at it. And at the very least, like he's definitely the best man beater in the room right now when he walks in there from a matchup standpoint. I love your point about like the movement skills that he shows. And yeah, like Danny, if our number, I'm take shopping this with you right now, because I want to do a segment for my YouTube channel about this, but I haven't quite had the stones to put it out there yet.
Yeah.
If our biggest concern about him is like he has a drop problem, and I get it, that is a thing that needs to be fixed if he's going to be the best version of himself. Who's the last player that failed because of drops? And I'm talking about drops alone. Like there are guys that have drop problems that they fall out of the league, but they also like can't get open. They can't do anything else to make the drops worth
it's
living
like one
through.
Of the, yeah.
So that's kind of my thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I can't really think of a specific guy who's purely just he couldn't catch the football was like an issue. I mean, if you look at some of the top drop leaders in the NFL every year, it's always like the very good players. So yeah, and I think drops is such a funny thing. It's almost like hitting or golfing, where it's just all in your head. And if you have a drop, then it kind of like compounds and you start thinking about it the next time. And so it's all over the place. I feel like sometimes guys will have a year where they drop a lot of passes and the next year they don't drop any, or they drop barely any. So it's not usually something I'm too concerned about. Unless it's just egregious and egregious hands technique. Or you can't track the ball, or like it's a lack of physical. Like you mentioned earlier about Sadiq, he's the type of guy that will drop the ball, but he'll make spectacular catches. That's what Casey Concepcion is. He makes the spectacular catches, but he does have like annoying drops. Right. It's almost like sometimes, and this is coachable, I think, sometimes he starts running with, before the ball gets to his hands kind of deal. Totally. And it's just like, that's the type of thing, just you can work that out over time. I mean, look at like Marv Harrison last year, or was it his rookie year? He was just dropping the most ridiculously easy plays. He's obviously just in it. Yeah, the beginning of this year, he's just in his head, man. It's just all psychological. So, and I think that stuff is hard to predict and hard to evaluate. And so I generally, unless a guy is just absolutely egregious with his hands, I generally don't put a ton of stock into drops. So. Yeah, he's my number 3 receiver. I've got Tate, Lemon, Concepcion, and then Boston and Tyson as my top 5. And those 4, Lemon, Concepcion, Boston, Tyson, are kind of grouped really closely together in my mind. So I wouldn't like read too much into that ranking, but it's just kind of flavors. And all these guys are a little bit different too.
Yeah, it's a flavors draft, especially at this position. That is for sure. We'll keep take shopping on this drops thing. That's something I'm going to think about here over the next couple of weeks. All right, we're going to take our last break. When we come back, is the player that Danny is willing to stand on the table for in this draft. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. It's time. Danny Kelly, it's time for you to stand on the table.
Captain, my captain. Set it down, Mr. Anderson.
We have Bills Mafia here.
Let's go!
I mean, if that doesn't get you fired up to hype up a prospect. All right, Danny Kelly, who is the prospect you are willing to stand on the table for this draft season?
I'm willing to stand on the table for Makai Lemon, especially coming out of the combine where there was a lot to be made about his sort of demeanor at the podium, where he had like the serpentine little look to him. He was, you know, really looking. It was kind of a crazy situation. I actually think that's a plus. I'm going to, you know, go on a limb here and say I like that. I like a little bit of craziness in my receiver. I want him to have that little bit of weird intensity. But more importantly, I just like what he brings to the field. I think he plays a lot bigger than his listed size, like height and weight. And I think he's, you know, run after the catch is really good. He can create an explosive plays. He can play at all three levels. I do think the only kind of hang up and the reason that he might not be a top 10 pick or even top 15 pick is just the size and the fact that he's probably best on the inside. But pretty much everything else I really like about him. My comp for him this year, which has not really landed with my co-hosts at the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, the Ringer Draft Show, is Doug Baldwin. And I think that's when I watched Doug, Angry Doug Baldwin. If you remember Angry Doug, he played on the outside, he played on the inside. He really quick, really can get off the line really easily. He's like one of the best in terms of like basketball moves as like a route runner, sort of like crossing guys up, the Euro step, all that stuff. He reminds me of that. And then also Baldwin was great at the catch point, like elevating over dudes. Just played bigger than he was. I think he was like 5'10", 190, and that's around what Lemon is. So he just reminds me a little bit of Doug Baldwin. I love that.
Yeah, I love the Doug Baldwin comparison because of how they play at the catch point, like way bigger than their size. That's the thing with Makai that really is the most fun part. Is I think he's just such a good contested catch receiver, great hands. I think he's the type of guy that will be good in the NFL. It's just how good is he going to be? That probably takes like the right system. Can I give you my? I actually don't know if I said this on because the combine feels like it was 100 years ago, even though we quite literally just saw each other a couple weeks ago in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said this on the show. I know I definitely said it in Indianapolis, but it's Mock Draft Monday. We're having fun here. The whole thing at the podium. Do you remember when Dylan Raiola, the quarterback in college, was doing like the Patrick Mahomes cosplay thing?
Yes.
Makai Lemon at the podium kind of felt like he was doing like a bad cosplay of Amon-Ra St. Brown, which is like the player he said he models his game after. It's his most popular player. We had the comp earlier on the screen about like Lance Airline compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Everybody compares him to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He said he models his game after USC receiver, whatever. He's channeling. He's doing like because St. Brown's got that like intensity to him, you know. And I think Makai was a little. Again, it's an exaggerated. When you're doing an impression of somebody, you usually exaggerate, and I think that was kind of what he was doing. It's like a weird, exaggerated impression of Amon-Ra St. Brown. So, like, that's my I'm letting him off the hook theory of what was going on at the podium. Do you buy that at all?
No, I think that's absolutely right because I saw a couple of their interviews with him from that same day. Even he did an interview with Pro Football Talk, I think, right after or right before, and he was like relatively normal. I mean, I think he's got a little bit of swagger, which I like that. Sure. I want him to be confident and want the football kind of deal. That's what you want in your receivers. You don't want a guy who's timid and sort of passive at the receiver position because then they're just not going to get the football. So, I think that to me was more just a funny story and fun to talk about, but I actually wasn't truly concerned about it. And plus you saw a lot of, people that are close to the USC program, maybe it was just fans I saw, but it was anecdotal. But I saw a ton of people were like, he never got in trouble at school. He was a great teammate. No one, you never heard any of this stuff coming out that he was like a weird guy or hard to handle or hard to deal with. So I'm not actually worried about it. I think it was pretty funny overall. But yeah, I love a guy who punches above his weight in terms of physicality, winning at the catch point, my ball, I'm going to go get it kind of deal. I don't like receivers that, like I said, are passive and kind of wait for the football to get to them. I want a guy who's going to go like, I'm getting that ball and you don't have anything, you can't do anything about it kind of deal. So you see that with Lemon. And I think, he's got the short area burst. He's got the run after the catch ability. I think he'll be productive in the pros. I don't know if he'll be number one, but I think he'll be a good player in the pros.
And I think if there's anything this past season told us about the wide receiver position, I remember Robert Mays and I did a pod on his show, The Athletic Football Show, about how like the archetype of what is a number one wide receiver has changed. And honestly, it looks a lot like Makai Lemon, like the JSNs, the Amon-Ra St. Browns, the Puka Nakuas. I think he's sort of in that bucket, even if he's not quite that guy. So yeah, I really like Makai Lemon a lot. And look, like if he's a little bit of an oddball, luckily, we know that there's never. Don't worry, a weird guy's never been a great NFL receiver. That is for sure. We've never had any oddballs at the wide receiver position. So there is that. I love it. Standing on the table for Makai Lemon. Danny Kelly, appreciate your time, buddy. Tell the people out there what they can check out from you all the way through this draft season.
You can check out the Ringer draft guide at theringer.com. That's scouting reports from me and a bunch of other stuff on there. And then you can check out the Ringer NFL Draft Show, which turns into the Ringer Fantasy Football Show during the regular season. So we do fantasy and the draft.
Boom. Look, I mean, listen, if you're listening to this show, which is the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast on Mock Draft Monday, that sounds like a show that's right up your alley.
Absolutely.
So you know what? There you go. Definitely check that show out. You, Danny, Craig are great. You guys are hilarious. I love seeing you guys at every league event. Tell the boys I said hello as well. And
will do.
For the people out there, I mean, come on, listen, you're watching Netflix. You're like me. You're watching Homeland season 5 while you're walking in the morning. Scroll up a little bit and check out the guys at the Ringer. Come on, give me a break there. All right, that is going to do it for today's show. Appreciate the hell out of Danny Kelly for joining us on this one. Tomorrow, we are going to be back with Justin Boone for your post-free agency panic meter episode. Please make sure you send in those panic meter coming out of free agency. Listen, who are you freaking out about? Who are you panicking over? It could be dynasty, it could be redraft, whatever. Send them in, fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. We want to hear from you guys. Until then, we are out.